Welcome back. In the last lesson, we looked at presence and why texture, clarity, and dehaze work best after white balance and exposure are already established. Today, we move to color. And this is where underwater photographers can get into trouble very quickly. When an image looks dull, the instinct is to often add saturation. But if white balance, exposure, or presence is still wrong, stronger color usually makes those problems more obvious. Color should not repair an unfinished edit. It should refine a photograph that already has a solid foundation. In this lesson, we'll look at how to diagnose the color problem, choose the right Lightroom control, and most importantly, know when to stop. Diagnose, decide, move on. Let's take a look at where color fits into the consistent underwater edit system. Color is the fourth step in the system. By the time I reach color, white balance should already have corrected the major color cast. Exposure should have established the tonal foundation, and presence should have added the right amount of definition. That sequence matters because color controls amplify what is already in the photograph. If the foundation is wrong, stronger color usually exaggerates the problem. So before I touch vibrance, saturation, the color mixer, or point color, I ask one simple question. Is the foundation ready for color? If the answer is yes, color can do its real job. It can refine what is already working instead of trying to rescue the edit. Next, we will look at a very common mistake that underwater photographers make when it comes to color controls. The most common mistake I see at this stage is reaching for saturation because the photograph looks dull. Saturation affects every color at the same time. If the water is already too blue, it can become electric. If coral is already intense, it can become unnatural. Fish colors can begin to compete with the subject. And when people are in the frame, skin tones can quickly look unrealistic. The issue is usually not that Lightroom needs more color. The issue is that we have not diagnosed what the photograph actually needs. So before increasing saturation, go back and check the foundation, white balance, exposure, and presence. Once those are working, color can refine the photograph instead of exaggerating the problems. The takeaway is simple. More saturation is not always the answer. Before I make any color adjustment, I check the foundation first. First, is white balance correct? Are the colors believable and is the image starting from the right color foundation? Second, is exposure working? I want the overall tones balanced with useful detail in the highlights and shadows. Third, is presence appropriate? Texture, clarity, and dehaze should support the photograph, not create new problems. If any of those first three steps are still unfinished, color is not the solution. Once white balance, exposure, and presence are working together, color can do what it is supposed to do, refine the photograph rather than repair it. Next, we will look at the role of color. Color correction and color enhancement are not the same thing. Color correction is about restoring a believable starting point. If the whole image still feels too blue, too green, or too warm, I am still solving a foundation problem. That usually takes me back to white balance. Color enhancement comes later. Once the foundation is working, I can refine the photograph with vibrance, saturation, the color mixer, or point color. That distinction matters because the same slider can either improve the photograph or exaggerate a problem, depending on when I use it. So I correct first, then I enhance. If the foundation still needs correction, I am not ready to push color. Next, let's determine what kind of color problem the image has. Now that the foundation is working, the next question is, how big is the color problem? Is it global, color specific, or local? If the whole photograph feels wrong, I treat that as a global color problem. That usually sends me back to white balance or to an overall color adjustment. If one color family is the problem, I can be more targeted. That is where color mixer or point color becomes useful. And if the problem is limited to one subject or one small area, I do not want to force a global correction. That may really be a local problem that belongs in masking. This is why I diagnose the scope before I touch a slider. Scope first, tool second. Next, let's take a look at what the different color controls are and what each does. Now we come to the 4 color controls I use most often, and they do not all do the same job. Vibrance is my gentler overall adjustment. It can add life without pushing every color equally. Saturation is global. It increases or decreases the intensity of all colors, so it is a powerful, but it is also easy to overdo. The color mixer is more targeted. It lets me work with individual color families, which is especially useful for water, coral, or fish colors. Point color is even more precise. I can sample a specific color and refine a narrower range without affecting everything else. The important part is not memorizing which control is strongest. The important part is diagnosing the problem first and choosing the least aggressive control that solves it. Once the problem is solved, I move on. Now let's take a look at different subjects and the different color decisions. Different underwater subjects require different color decisions. Blue water does not need the same treatment as green water. Coral does not need the same treatment as a fish. Skin tones are even less forgiving. With blue water, I want the water to stay believable. With green water, I do not try and force every scene towards blue. Sometimes the green atmosphere is part of the photograph. With coral, I am watching texture and detail. It is easy to push the color until the coral becomes neon and the fine structure starts to disappear. With fish, the color should support the subject, not overwhelm the frame. With people, skin tones need to remain believable. And when ambient light and artificial light are mixed, different parts of the photograph may need different color decisions. So the question is not, how much color should I add? The better question is, what does the subject need? Next, let's look at the saturation control. This is why saturation can go wrong so quickly. Saturation does not know whether the color in the photograph is correct. It simply amplifies what is already there. So if the image still has a color cast, saturation makes that cast stronger. If the water is already too blue or too green, saturation can push it into something that no longer looks believable. If the photograph already has too much contrast or presence, stronger color can make the image feel even harsher. And when every color gets louder, the subject can lose its visual priority because everything starts competing for attention. The answer is not simply to use less saturation. The better answer is to fix the foundation first, then decide whether the photograph actually needs more saturation at all. Diagnose first, then decide. This is where diagnose, decide, move on framework becomes especially useful. First, diagnose. What is actually wrong? Is the color problem global, color specific, or local? And before I touch a color control, I ask whether color is really the problem at all. Then I decide. Which control fits the problem? Vibrance for a gentle overall lift, saturation for global intensity, the color mixer or point color when I need more targeted control. Then I move on. This is the part many photographers skip. Once the problem is solved, stop adjusting. Do not keep moving sliders just because they are available. The goal is to solve the color problem, preserve believable color and detail, and continue to the next step. That is how the workflow becomes faster and more consistent. Diagnose, decide, move on. Now let's look at one of the most important lessons to learn using the system. One of the hardest parts of color is knowing when to stop. A photograph can move from believable to overdone very quickly. So before I make another color adjustment, I ask a few simple questions. Does the color support the subject? Does the water still look believable? Is detail still preserved? Does the image still feel natural? And does it fit with the rest of the photographs from the same dive, trip, or story? If the answer to those questions is yes, I am probably finished with color. The goal is not maximum color. The goal is believable, intentional color that supports the photograph. Once that is working, I move on. That brings us to the end of color. The big idea is simple. Color should refine a photograph that already has a solid foundation. It should not be used to repair problems that belong in white balance, exposure, or presence. So diagnose the problem, decide which control fits the job, and once the problem is solved, move on. In the next lesson, we will move into masking, where we begin solving local problems without changing the entire photograph. If you want to go deeper, you can read the full blog lesson, download my free guide, 10 Lightroom fixes every underwater photographer should know, or learn more about underwater Lightroom mastery. And if this series is helping you, subscribe so you do not miss the next lesson. Thanks for watching. Diagnose, decide, move on.